My name is Stephanie, and for most of my adult life, my family has called me the ghost of Beacon Hill. To them, I am a cautionary tale, a 34-year-old spinster who spends her days in a damp basement bindery, smelling of old glue and decaying vellum. While my sister Taylor posts photos of her glamorous public relations life from rooftop bars, I am usually bent over a magnifying glass, tweezing mold spores off a 17th century map. They think I scrape by on pennies. They think I'm tragic. What they don't know is that the dusty old books they mock have built me a fortune of $18,400,000. And tonight, at Thanksgiving dinner, they are about to find out exactly what happens when you underestimate the quiet ones. I'm curious, do you have a passion or a side hustle that your family just doesn't get? Or maybe they even look down on it? Drop a yes in the comments if you've ever been the black sheep just for being different. I want to see who else is in the club. My wealth wasn't an accident. It wasn't a lottery win or a lucky stock pick. It was forensic science. The first time I realized the power of the invisible eye, I was 26. I was at an estate sale in a crumbling mansion outside Boston, digging through a box of mildewed paperbacks that everyone else had ignored. At the bottom of the box, beneath a stack of romance novels from the 1980s, was a small, leather-bound journal. To the untrained eye, it looked like garbage. The cover was stained with water damage, and the pages were stiff with age. The estate appraisers had marked the whole box for $5. But I saw something they missed. I saw the foxing patterns on the paper, those tiny, rust-colored spots that only develop on rag paper made before 1870. I smelled the iron gall ink, a metallic, acidic scent that modern pens can't replicate. I paid the $5, took the journal back to my basement, and spent 3 weeks restoring it. I didn't just clean it. I performed surgery. I used a microspatula to lift centuries of grime. I used a specialized chemical sponge to absorb the mold without damaging the ink. And as I cleaned, I read. It wasn't just a diary. It was the field journal of a Union soldier who had served as a personal aide to General Grant. It contained hand-drawn maps of supply lines that historians thought were lost forever. I sold that piece of garbage to a private collector in Virginia for $85,000. I didn't tell a soul. I took that money and invested it. I bought more inventory. I bought the building my shop was in. Then I bought the building next door. Over 8 years, I repeated this process hundreds of times. I learned to spot the difference between a reproduction and an original by the weave of the canvas. I learned to identify a fake signature by the hesitation marks in the ink flow, microscopic tremors where a forger's hand paused. My family looked at me and saw a woman playing with trash. I looked at the world and saw value that was invisible to them. This discrepancy was my armor. As long as they thought I was poor, they left me alone. They didn't ask for loans. They didn't ask for favors. They just patted me on the head and pitied me. And I let them. I drove a 10-year-old Volvo station wagon not because I couldn't afford a Porsche, but because a Volvo is invisible. I wore thrifted wool sweaters not because I couldn't afford cashmere, but because looking dowdy made me uninteresting. I built a fortress of boredom around my life, and inside that fortress, I was building an empire. My sister Taylor was the opposite. She was loud, bright, and expensive. She worked in public relations for a luxury fashion brand, and her life was a performance art piece. She married a man named Brad who launched tech startups that never seemed to launch. They lived in a sprawling condo in the Seaport district that I knew they couldn't afford. They leased cars they couldn't buy. They went on vacations they put on credit cards. They were drowning in debt, but to our parents, Richard and Susan, they were the success story. Richard and Susan were old-school Boston socialites, people who believed that net worth was something you wore, not something you banked. They valued the appearance of wealth over the reality of it. To them, Taylor was thriving because she looked the part. I was failing because I didn't. They invited me to holidays out of obligation, a monthly reminder of my inadequacy. I went because it was easier than fighting. I sat at their table, ate their cold soup, and let them monologue about Taylor's latest gala or Brad's latest disruptive app. I played the role of the silent, dusty librarian. It was a role I had perfected. But this Thanksgiving was different. The air in my parents' brownstone felt brittle, like glass about to shatter. The heating system in the old house was acting up again, leaving a damp chill in the dining room that no amount of candles could chase away. Taylor arrived 45 minutes late, breezing in with a flurry of shopping bags and manic energy. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my entire year's rent, or at least, what they thought my rent was. Brad trailed behind her, looking gray and anxious, checking his phone every 30 seconds. "Sorry we're late," Taylor announced, not looking sorry at all. "Traffic was a nightmare, and I simply had to pick up this wine. It's a pet nat from a vineyard in Oregon that hasn't even released to the public yet." She set the bottle down like it was a holy relic. My mother, Susan, clasped her hands together. "Oh, Taylor, you always find the most exquisite things. Doesn't she, Stephanie?" I looked up from the table where I was folding napkins. "It looks very nice," I said, my voice flat. "Nice," Taylor scoffed, pouring herself a glass before anyone else had even sat down. "Stephanie, nice is a word for a sweater from Target. This is culture." I went back to folding napkins. This was the dynamic. Taylor performed, I observed. My father, Richard, came in from the study, looking equally frazzled. He gave me a curt nod. "Stephanie, shop still open?" "Yes, Dad. Still open." "Still tinkering with those old maps?" "Yes, Dad." "Well," he sighed, pouring himself a scotch. "At least it keeps you busy. Keeps you out of trouble." He turned to Taylor, his face lighting up. "So, tell us about the Hamptons." The photos looked incredible. And so it began. The dinner was a monologue of Taylor's achievements. The parties she planned. The celebrities she almost met. The influencers she managed. I ate my turkey in silence, watching Brad. He wasn't eating. He was drinking wine like it was water, and his leg was bouncing under the table so hard it was shaking the silverware. Something was wrong. The facade was cracking. Taylor, oblivious or perhaps overcompensating, decided to pivot the attention to me. "So, Steph," she said, leaning forward, a piece of turkey poised on her fork. "Mom says you're still driving that ancient Volvo. Is it even safe? I mean, I know money is tight, but surely you can lease something decent. It's embarrassing for Dad when you park that thing in front of the house." "It runs fine," I said, taking a sip of water. "It's an eyesore," my mother added gently. "We worry about you, dear." "Really? If you need help with a down payment on a Civic or something, just ask. We can probably scrape something together." "I'm fine," I repeated. "I like my car." "You like struggling," Taylor corrected, shaking her head. "You have this martyr complex. You think there's some virtue in being poor. There isn't. It's just sad." I felt a flash of irritation, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. "Gray rock," I reminded myself. "Be boring. Be a stone. Don't give them a reaction." "Pass the cranberries, please," I said. Taylor rolled her eyes, bored by my lack of defense. She pulled out her phone to show off photos from their Hamptons trip, but the battery was dead. "Ugh," she groaned. "Brad, give me your phone." "I'm using it," Brad snapped too quickly. Taylor frowned. She looked around the table. Her eyes landed on my iPad, which was sitting next to my plate. I had brought it to read a book on the train ride over. "Steph, let me use your iPad. I want to show Mom the pictures of the rental house. I can log into my cloud." "I'd rather you didn't," I said. "I'm in the middle of a book." "Oh my God, don't be so stingy," Taylor said, reaching across the table and grabbing it before I could stop her. "It's an iPad, not a diary. What are you hiding? Erotic fan fiction." She laughed at her own joke and unlocked the screen. I froze. I hadn't closed my apps. I had been reviewing my quarterly financials on the train. The screen wasn't showing a book. It was showing my dashboard. Taylor swiped. She frowned. She squinted at the screen. "What is this?" she mumbled. "Is this a game?" Then she stopped. Her eyes widened. She pulled the iPad closer to her face. The room went quiet, sensing the shift in her energy. 18 million, she whispered. "What?" my mother asked. Taylor looked up, her face pale, her eyes darting from the screen to me and back again. 18 million, she said, louder this time. 400,000. $922. She turned the iPad around and shoved it into the center of the table. Stephanie, whose account is this? I looked at the screen. The liquid crystal display offered the only truth in the room. Total net worth, $18,400,922.45. YTD growth, plus 12%. It's mine, I said. My father laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound. Don't be ridiculous. Stephanie doesn't have $18, let alone 18 million. It's a glitch. Or a simulation. It's not a simulation, Dad. I said, my voice steady. It's my brokerage account. And my real estate holdings. And my cash reserves. My mother reached for the iPad. Her hands were shaking. She scrolled down. She saw the list of assets. The Beacon Hill building. The commercial warehouse in South Boston. The Vanguard index funds. She saw the transaction history. Deposit, $85,000. Deposit, $420,000. Deposit, $12,500. She looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, she didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with fear. Is this real? She whispered. Is this illegal? Stephanie, are you laundering money? Are you in trouble? It's antiques, Mom, I said. It's rare books. It's maps. It's the junk you make fun of. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. It lasted for 10 seconds, but it felt like 10 years. I watched them process it. I watched the gears turning in their heads. I watched the realization wash over them that the daughter they had treated like a charity case could buy and sell them 10 times over. And then the pivot happened. It wasn't awe. It wasn't pride. It was entitlement. Taylor was the first to recover. Her shock melted instantly into a look of hungry calculation. You have $18 million, she said, her voice rising in pitch. And you let Mom pay for your train ticket here? You let Dad buy you dinner last month? I didn't ask him to buy me dinner, I said. He insisted. He wanted to feel benevolent. You lied to us, Taylor accused, slamming her hand on the table. For years. You sat there in your ugly sweaters and your old car, and you let us worry about you. You let us think you were failing. I never said I was failing, I countered. You assumed I was failing, because I wasn't flashy. I just didn't correct you. Why? My father demanded, his face reddening. Why hide it? Unless you're ashamed of it? Or unless you just didn't want to share it? Because I knew this would happen, I said, gesturing to the table. Because I knew the moment you saw a number, you wouldn't see me anymore. You'd just see a bank. That is an awful thing to say, my mother cried, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. We are your family. We love you. We would have celebrated you. Would you? I asked. Or would you have asked me to pay for Taylor's wedding? Or her condo? Or your country club dues? Well, since you brought it up, Brad interrupted. His voice was shaky, desperate. He looked at Taylor, then at me. We actually are in a bit of a situation. Brad, don't, Taylor hissed, but there was no conviction in it. She wanted him to ask. The startup, Brad said, rushing the words out. We're having a liquidity crunch. It's temporary. Just a bridge loan. But the investors pulled out last week. If we don't infuse capital by Monday, we miss payroll. We miss the mortgage on the condo. We lose everything. He looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. How much? I asked, though I already knew the answer would be obscene. $4.5 million, Taylor blurted out. To cover the debts and recapitalize. Just as an investment, Steph. You'd get equity. It's a smart move. Brad's app is going to be huge. I looked at them. I looked at the cold turkey. I looked at the iPad still glowing in the center of the table. $4.5 million. They didn't want a loan. They wanted a bailout. They wanted me to pour nearly a quarter of my life's work into a hole that Brad had dug with his ego and Taylor had decorated with her vanity. No, I said. What? Taylor blinked. What do you mean, no? I mean no. I'm not giving you $4.5 million. It's an investment, she screamed. It's for family. You have 18 million sitting there doing nothing. You're hoarding it like a dragon while your sister is about to lose her home. You're not losing your home because of bad luck, I said quietly. You're losing it because you bought a home you couldn't afford to impress people you don't like. Giving you money won't fix that. It will just delay the inevitable. You selfish bitch, Taylor spat. You think you're better than us? You think because you got lucky with some old books you can sit there and judge us. I'm not judging you, I said. I'm just declining to participate in your delusion. My father stood up. He looked imposing, or at least he tried to. Stephanie, that money, look, I know you earned it technically. But you earned it while living under the safety net we provided. I supported you through college. I paid your rent when you were 22. That money belongs to the family pot. It's community property. My gaze drifted to my father, but my mind went back 10 years to a dusty attic and a box of trash. Actually, Dad, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. Since we're talking about origins, do you remember the spring cleaning of 2014? When you cleared out Grandpa's attic?
He frowned.
What does that have to do with anything? You threw away a box of mildewed trash, I said. You told me to haul it to the dump. I pulled a diary out of that box. You called it garbage. I sold it for $85,000. That was my seed money. That was the start of the 18 million.
You didn't support me, Dad.
You literally threw my fortune in the trash. I just dug it out. His face went gray. He sat back down slowly. Taylor wasn't done. She stood up, tears streaming down her face. Angry, weaponized tears. I don't care about the diary. I care that my life is falling apart, and you can fix it with a signature, and you won't. If you walk out of here without helping us, you're dead to me. You will never see your nieces again. You will never be welcome in this house. I looked at her. I looked at the sister who had mocked my sweaters, my car, my life. I looked at the parents who had only valued me when I was invisible. I won't pay for a life that was built to make me feel small, I said. The velvet chair scraped against the hardwood as I rose. I reached across the table and picked up my iPad. I tucked it under my arm. The antique shop girl doesn't exist, I told them. She was just a story you told yourselves so you didn't have to feel threatened by me. But the woman standing here? She owes you nothing. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I walked down the hallway, past the photos of Taylor winning awards, past the photos of Taylor's wedding, past the shrine to the golden child. I opened the heavy front door and stepped out into the cold Boston night. The air was sharp and clean. Behind me, I heard Taylor screaming my name, but I didn't turn around. I kept walking. I walked all the way to the train station, and with every step, the invisible weight I had carried for 34 years grew lighter, until finally, it was gone. The weeks following Thanksgiving were defined by a silence, so profound it felt like a physical presence in my shop. I didn't block their numbers. I didn't need to. The gray rock method had evolved into something permanent. I simply stopped being a source of supply. When Taylor sent a barrage of texts ranging from apologetic to vitriolic, I didn't respond. When my mother left weeping voicemails about tearing the family apart, I didn't call back. I realized that my silence was the loudest thing I had ever said. I watched their slow collapse from a distance, like viewing a shipwreck through a telescope. It didn't bring me joy. It didn't bring me satisfaction. It just brought a quiet confirmation that I had made the right choice. 6 months later, the news broke in the business section of the Globe. Brad's startup had imploded. There were allegations of misused investor funds, lifestyle spending disguised as business expenses. It was a scandal that shattered Taylor's carefully curated image. They lost the condo in the seaport. They lost the leased cars. My parents, who had leveraged their own retirement to help bridge the gap one last time, were forced to sell the Beacon Hill brownstone. They moved to a small, sensible condo in the suburbs, the kind of place they used to mock when I lived there. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that they blamed me. They told people I had abandoned them. They told people I was cold, ungrateful, and greedy. Let them talk. They were trying to pay their bills with stories, while I was busy building a future. And that future walked through my door on a rainy Tuesday in March. Her name was Haley. She was 22, wearing a coat that was too thin for the weather and carrying a backpack held together with duct tape. She was a history student at the local university, and she had come in to ask if I was hiring. She didn't have a resume. She didn't have references. But she had something else. While I was reviewing some paperwork, I watched her wander over to a display case. She stopped in front of a seemingly mundane stack of letters I had just acquired. She stared at them for a long time. "The ink is wrong," she murmured, almost to herself. I looked up. "Excuse me?" She jumped, looking terrified. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Those letters. They're labeled as mid-19th century, but the ink looks like aniline dye. That wasn't synthesized until 1856, and the fading pattern suggests it's synthetic indigo, not natural. If these are dated 1840, they might be forgeries." I put down my pen. I walked over to the case. I unlocked it and took out the letters. I handed her a pair of white cotton gloves. "Show me," I said. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were steady. She pointed out the microscopic bleed of the ink into the paper fibers. She explained the chemical difference in the oxidation. She was right. She had the eye. She saw the invisible world. I hired her on the spot. Over the next year, Haley became the daughter I would never have and the younger sister I wish Taylor had been. I taught her everything. I taught her how to smell the difference between animal glue and synthetic adhesive. I taught her how to negotiate with estate lawyers who thought they were smarter than us. I watched her confidence grow, watched her spine straighten, watched her realize that her weird obsession with history was actually a superpower. I didn't just pay her a wage, I mentored her. I paid off her student loans anonymously, a grant from a foundation she didn't know I controlled. I wasn't buying her affection. I was investing in her potential. I was planting the seed that would outlast me. My shop, once a dusty basement that my family ridiculed, became a sanctuary. It became a place where value was recognized, not assigned. I expanded the bindery, turning the back room into a preservation lab where we restored books for museums and libraries. We saved history that others would have thrown away. Sometimes, late at night, when the city is asleep and the only sound is the gentle hum of the dehumidifiers, I think about that Thanksgiving. I think about the look on Taylor's face when she realized the bank account wasn't a glitch. I think about my father's face when he realized he had thrown away a fortune because it looked like trash. They spent their lives chasing the appearance of wealth, and in the end, they were left with nothing but the appearance. I spent my life chasing the substance of things, and I ended up with everything. I am sitting at my workbench now, restoring a first edition of The Age of Innocence. The leather is supple under my hands. The gold leaf lettering catches the light. It is quiet here. It is peaceful. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel like a ghost. I feel solid. I feel real. My worth was never in the $18 million. The money is just a tool, a shield against the noise, a key to unlock doors. My worth was in the quiet, stubborn refusal to let the world tell me what I was. My worth was in the ability to see the gold in the dust. Sometimes the people who are supposed to see your value are the ones most blind to it. If you're building something in silence right now, keep going. Your time will come. If this story resonated with you, please share it. Let's remind the world that the quiet ones are the ones to watch.